Okay, so greetings everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. Apologies for the slight delay in starting. We were trying to sort out some technical things with PowerPoint. I think Microsoft Office has become so intelligent that sometimes it's a bit more difficult to do the simple things. But fortunately, we sorted it out. So today we're gonna have a presentation from Jeane Nikolai. She's the director for the Department of Energy, and she's going to be talking to us about energy efficiency and demand side management in buildings. So it's kind of fits in with what we were talking about in our last presentation, which was getting started on the path to net zero. And hopefully everyone who was in that meeting is already busy working on getting to net zero in your buildings right now. But this is something where you can get additional insights for helping to reach those goals. And also Jeane has agreed to talk a lot about what's kind of going on with in government around some things to do with planning and renewable energy and things of that nature. So she's a very useful resource to have. So my suggestion would be to ask as many questions as you can while we have a here in the meeting. And then after Gina's presentation, we're going to obviously have questions and answers, but then we just want to have a general conversation and hear from everyone about what you're currently doing, what ideas you might have, what questions you may have about how you can get started. I know we have persons in the forum today who are at different levels or experience levels with this type of work. So those of us who have a bit more experience, if we can help those who are just getting started, then that's kind of like the whole idea of the Green Building Forum. So without further ado, let me just see if Jeannie is ready. Oh, and Jeannie is ready. So I'm going to hand things over to Jeannie, and she's going to talk to us about energy efficiency and demand side management in buildings. Thank you very much for joining us today, Jeannie.
Oh, thank you, Eugene, for the invitation. I'm always grateful for it, for the opportunity to kind of connect with the building management community and anybody who's interested in kind of moving toward a lower carbon existence, especially as large buildings are represent half of our electricity or over half of our electricity use in Bermuda. So without going on too long, I have just a very short presentation for you today, and some of it may be stuff some of you already know, and some of it might be new. And I'm really hoping that we get an opportunity to have some good conversation afterward, because really that's the whole point of this, not so much the presentation. So I'd like to just start by talking about the kinds of things that we've done already that are on the go right now. So you'll all know that we don't have any duty for solar PV, not for any part of that system. So the racking, the mounting, the inverters, all of that is exempt from duty right now. It's a zero duty. Also solar thermal, so solar hot water, and any replacement parts. And because if you're a facilities manager in Bermuda, you're often also responsible for your organization's fleet, motor fleet. You should know that electric vehicles, or sorry, let me correct myself, electric cars and electric motorcycles are also zero duty. There's only a 10% duty on compact fluorescence LEDs and heat pump water heaters. Now we're working on that as well. I know it's been a slow road, but it's a matter of convincing customs that this is a worthwhile duty relief to give. So while they jumped in with both feet on the things that are noted there, they weren't sold on compact fluorescence LEDs and heat pump water heaters. As it relates to LEDs and heat pump water heaters, my goal personally is to try and lobby and get that those duty reliefs as zero. It's still a preferential rate from what you pay ordinarily. I think I want to say compact fluorescence and incandescents are up at 25%. not entirely sure, but there is significant duty relief on those items. And then up at 12.5% is electric trucks. So trucks that you would use for delivery, or trucks that you would use for other elements of service in your organization, specifically for transporting goods, are 12.5%. And apart from that, electric vehicles are dutiable if they're used for other purposes. So that's these things. Now, next slide is another measure that's in place, and this is where I really hope you're a lot more excited, is CPC 4209. It's not in the code. When you make a customs declaration, you've got a 4-digit number and then another 4-digit number, and they're separated by a full stop, right? By like a decimal. This isn't in that section. This is in the schedule at the end of the customs code, the tariff code. And CPC 4209 exempts any importer from bringing in items that are imported for commercial purposes, for a commercial building, for business purposes, for the purpose of demand side management, with a letter of authorization from our office. So far, I've not had any requests that I've denied. Not to say I'm a pushover, but they've all been perfectly aligned with demand side management. So what do we define as demand side management? Well, some would define it as being quite narrow, that is those things like the computer system that you need to manage your energy. Some people consider that as kind of the nut, the kernel of demand side management. We're viewing it much more broadly than that. So it'll encompass energy efficiency, demand response, dynamic demand, and distributed energy. So distributed energy is covered anyway under the other customs duty relief. But for all the other things, they're not covered unless you get this authorization. And I would strongly urge you to take advantage of it, because I can count on 2 hands all the letters that we've ever written for authorization. I would love to be flooded with requests for this duty relief, to be perfectly honest. Energy efficiency items can be anything from a hyper efficient chiller on your building to window film that cuts out heat gain. It could be lighting. It could be really anything that lowers your energy use. And we purposefully wanted it to be that broad, to encourage building owners to participate in more energy efficiency. And we can circle back on that one later. Planning measures. You may already be aware that the International Energy Conservation Code of 2012, which is basically, oh, I didn't close my parenthesis. How sloppy of me. Sorry. It's essentially just an augmented form of ASHRAE 90.1, if you're familiar with it. And the IECC has actually been in place for new commercial buildings since, I want to say, about 2014, the last time the code was reviewed. However, it wasn't strictly enforced. And now we're at a point where we need to make some policy decisions, and we meaning government, not me personally, as to how stridently those will be applied in future, that this conservation code can be applied in future. Essentially, what is in IECC is ASHRAE 90.1, which is all the requirements around energy efficiency in systems, and also to a certain extent the actual design of the building. But it's also about providing for, I think, up to 20% of your own electricity as a requirement for new builds. I'd love to see that enforced. Unfortunately, there's nothing in place at this point for residential customers, for residential builds, I mean. So if the residential market is a bit of a, I don't want to say it's the Wild West, but in terms of energy efficiency, it is. There are no requirements. There are guidelines, there are suggestions, there's guidance given, but there's no requirements for it. And that could change in future. Now, I would say another challenge of that, because I can remember sitting around the table at the Department of Planning the last time the Bermuda plan was being, or the building codes were being reviewed. And there was a lot of resistance from the design community who said, you can't tell me how to design. You know, it's not my problem how much it costs to operate the building. That's the customer. The customer wants this, then I'm going to design this. So I'm thinking that mindset has shifted since then, or I'd like to think it has. And hopefully that won't be as much of an issue, because in the IECC are also requirements for fenestration. So as an example, having a wall of glass on the south side of or southwest of a building would not be allowable under this code. So there are some design implications that are a bit more profound than certainly the design community may be used to. Future possibilities. We could in the future introduce building rating certifications like the Department of Health does for restaurants. My question about that, though, is how effective has that really been? Has anybody, I don't know if anybody I know has ever decided not to attend, not to patronize a certain restaurant because of its health department rating. I don't know that people even look at those things. So how effective would that be? So you can introduce anything, but you firstly want it to be effective, and secondly, you want to make sure that you have the manpower to enforce it. It needs to be meaningful and enforceable. We could wind up requiring IECC or something like IECC for all renovations. Right now, it applies only to new builds. But then the question is what are the cost implications for the building owners? Is that going to be something that's onerous? Will there be a stagnation in the building industry because building owners don't want to spend that kind of money doing the renovations to bring it up to modern code? I don't know. And then we could also require energy efficiency for all residential customers, for all residential construction. But again, what are the costs in that? And is this the right economy to introduce that? So I think right now, is this the last slide I have for what it's worth? I think right now what we need to concentrate on is what can we do with the resources that we have at hand? What is reasonable to do? Because the last thing I think anybody wants is to enlarge the civil service, because we need, we'd probably need to add more staff to enforce some of this. So what do we do? What are the answers to that? And I don't think we have those ready answers, but it would be great to talk to you as the building community to get your thoughts on some of this. Oops.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Jeannie. So is that your last? You can stop.
Yeah, that's the last one. I mean, I really wanted there to, yeah, that's the last one. I just wanted there to be more conversation about it rather than me just, to all of you.
No, that's great. I know I have some questions, and
sure,
hopefully there are some more. So if you can stop your share, we can kind of bring everyone up on the screen.
How do I stop my share?
Oh, just at the top, it should have a button. I mean, I
can't seem to find it. It just isn't coming.
Let me just do this. Let me see something.
Do I just close my?
Yeah, just one moment. If I just do this.
There we go.
Okay, yeah, you got it done.
Okay.
Great.
Oh, now I can see all of you. Sort of.
Yeah. All right, great. Much appreciated. So thank you for that update. I guess your presentation was a lot about the framework or the policy framework that the government has put in to assist with demand side management and things of that nature. I guess all the exemptions on duty and things of that nature. So I had two questions. Can you explain demand response and dynamic demand more in depth? I saw where you had energy efficiency,
right?
But and I think this came up in the last presentation we had, but just a better understand, so everyone understands exactly what that kind of means.
Well, I was going to say I'd invite any of our technicians around the table to jump in, because my understanding of it as not a technician may be a little bit different. But I'll give it a go. To my understanding, demand response is ways you can reduce demand, because you've got two kinds of charges on your electric bill as a larger commercial customer, right? You've got your demand charge, and then you've got your kilowatt hour rate. If you can keep your demand charge low, that affects your rates across the board for the whole month, right?
Right.
So if you can manage not to hit a high spiky peak, then that helps your energy consumption, your energy billing, because the reason for that peak, and if I'm talking about stuff that you already know, or if I'm incorrect, then please anyone jump in. But my understanding of it is you want to find ways to kind of squash that peak down.
Right.
So some of those things may be like at the height of the day, on the hottest day in August, you might not want to be running your air conditioning full pelt. You might want to have some very granular control over which zones are lit or cooled, and that can bring your demand down. And I see Denton's here, and Denton might be able to explain it even better than me, because that's kind of more his world than mine. And then dynamic demand, I'm not sure I have a good grip on. I think it's not far off demand response, or I could be wrong with that. But anyway, if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
Okay, Denton, you can jump in. Just unmute. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just jump in on that part on the
Thanks
demand.
for the rescue, Denton.
No problem. So the demand response, you're not far off, but demand response is best thought of in the context of the entire network of consumers and producers. And when the network gets jeopardized because there's too much demand on the system, or there's a shortfall of generating supply, then you need to balance that, because if not, the whole grid could collapse. So a demand response program usually allows and encourages, but financially, building owners and operators to curtail some of their use during those periods of I'll say crisis, if you will. As an example, you could shut down the cooling, keep the fans going, but shut down the cooling side of a HVAC system for 15 minutes. And that could make, if several buildings do it, that could make all the difference to the utility keeping things going. And then for participating in that, there usually is a financial incentive or a reward. And another version of it, which is more to the dynamic demand response, would be what's called an ADR solution. It's an automatic demand response. And that would be, if you look at it from an easy to understand model, would be residential properties or even commercial properties if you have a load that can be easily disrupted and without causing disruption to the customer. For residences, that would be like hot water heaters. You could turn hot water heaters off for 15 minutes across the entire country, and almost no one would notice. But usually that's facilitated by like a remote switch that's connected to a wireless network, and the utility would send a signal that it needs to curtail energy usage for the next 15 minutes or so, and then all the water heaters would, or a large number of them, would just stop heating water temporarily, and then 15 minutes later they would come back in, probably in a staggered manner. And the people that participate in that program are compensated for the inconvenience, but it winds up being more cost effective, because if you need to start up a gas turbine, which is a very inefficient producer of electricity, is even more expensive than running an ADR program. So hopefully that's a little helpful. Just wanted to jump in and just add that little tidbit.
Yeah.
Thanks, Denton.
Appreciate it, Denton. Yeah. And also, I know, unfortunately, Chris wasn't able to make it today, but Chris Warboys was speaking a bit in our last presentation about kind of like balancing out your energy. So if you look at the day, and maybe it's a certain time period in the day where your energy goes up.
Yep.
And so so what happens is the utility has to reserve enough power to be able to deliver that to you whenever you need it.
Exactly.
So
And
that's
there's a
called
price to
like,
pay for that.
so there's like this demand side billing. So you may
Yeah.
just spike up once during the month, but you actually have to pay for that capacity because they have to reserve it in case you do that again. So if
Yeah.
you level off your energy usage, then it actually starts to bring your cost down because the utility doesn't have to reserve that extra chunk of capacity to be able to
Yep.
feed you at that time, you know? So
Exactly right. Exactly
yeah.
right. And toward that end, it's
Oh, Denton's coming in again.
yeah.
I have one more part of it. You're right about
Okay.
the resource side of it. There's also kind of the hidden part, which is the distribution and transmission and distribution. So if you have big spikes in your demand, the network has to be able to supply that size. So the transformers, the cables, everything have to be sized to match that. But if you can bring your profile down to a lower level, then new assets that are being built out don't need to factor in, demand that's up here. So that's another part of it, is the impact on the transmission and distribution network also is captured in there.
Right. Give thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Jeannie, I interrupted
No.
you. Okay.
No, not at all. Not at all. This is a conversation. That's how we talk.
So I had another question because I mean, you've mentioned all these things that the government has put in place. So what advice would you give to, facilities managers, building owners, in terms of like how they can best take advantage of what the government currently has in place,
Well, I mean, I was hoping that just a little bit of knowledge could be a powerful thing for all of you, in that I'm not sure how well publicized CPC 4209 is, but it's a really good relief. It's a really good exemption that you could avail yourself of. And so long as you can tell me with hand over heart that this will tell me with the proper documentation as well. I want to see equipment cut sheets, etc. I want to see what how effective that equipment is. And equipment I use in a very broad sense. I mean, you could get that duty relief then. And it seems a shame to me that it's there for the taking. It's been there since I want to say again about 2013, 2014, around there. It's been in place for that long. And in all that time, I can count on two hands the authorization letters that I've written, which is kind of a shame. I mean, I would love to have my office flooded with them. I would love to have that scenario where we're just struggling to get those authorizations out. But it's so important. I mean, it cuts in some cases maybe even up to a third off of your costs of getting that equipment in and deploying it. And that's pretty meaningful, I would hope.
So just for the purposes of everyone, since you haven't been inundated, could you just explain that one more time? So what qualifies somebody to be able to get that exemption?
First of all, you write me an email. Just send me an email with the goods, with a description of the goods that you want to bring in for the purpose of demand side management, right? It could be anything. It could be an automated system to dynamically control your demand. That'd be fine. It could be window film. It could be a chiller, but you won't know until you call us, until you contact us and ask. What we'll do then is we'll evaluate what you've sent us. We'll review it. We'll call in our colleagues over at Works and Engineering if we're stumped, but we'll endeavor to get back to you within at most a couple of days, so you know whether or not you could import this thing, whatever it is that you're asking about, under that duty relief. And customs generally, they won't challenge it so long as they have that letter of authorization from us. They required that letter of authorization because the category is so broad. So as an example, you might bring in window treatments that would reduce your heat gain. And customs might otherwise say, hey, that's not a piece of building equipment, where I would argue that yes, it is. And yes, that'd be allowable. So we're pretty liberal as it relates to the kinds of stuff you can bring in. But reach out to us and ask. We won't give you the letter of authorization until the goods are about to arrive, because we have to have the bill of lading information on there. We have to have the invoice on there. And I think that's pretty much it, as far as what we need to issue the letter. And we can issue the letters electronically. You don't need to pick them up from my office. We can do almost everything electronically for you these days. So it can be a pretty easy process. Then you take that letter and you attach it to your customs declaration when you are importing the goods. And you have to actually declare it under 4209. You can't expect that they'll do it for you or they'll know. They won't. So before you order it, reach out to us and clear it first.
Okay, so basically anybody who's doing anything to try to help with demand side management of electricity
As it relates to commercial buildings, yes.
That's right, to commercial. It's not to residential yet, but
regrettably, no.
Yeah, but that's fine. That's our audience today. So we're dealing with commercial properties. So anybody who's doing anything. So has anybody in the group embarked upon that? Is anybody currently working on anything around demand side management in their office or aware of that going on? Just to ask the group. I guess that's why you're not getting many many applications. So I guess that's something that really needs to be pushed a little bit more. I had another statement, and if anybody has any questions, just wave your hand or just put your hand up in the in Zoom. But you mentioned about introducing building codes, and you use kind of like health codes as an example to say,
oh, you mean building ratings?
Building ratings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's something that we've started to have a conversation with, right? And you were saying like you're not sure if people actually, pay attention to that. Do people look at the health ratings before they go into a restaurant, or how would that impact us, as it relates to buildings? So my thought would be that we would implement building codes because we have a larger vision that the entire community buys into. So for example, if we're trying to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and we have targets for that, then I would think that we should be implementing building codes that are helping us to be able to achieve that. You know what I mean? Even when you start talking about vehicles, for example, that's easy for everyone to understand. If we're trying to move away from fossil fuel emissions, then we should be putting things in place that encourage, zero emission vehicles. And so it's the same way with buildings. What can be put in place that is encouraging people to deal with more energy efficiency, demand side management, and also even just incorporating renewable energy? So I don't know.
So yeah, I was going to say, just to respond to that, is the conservation code overlay will help. And though I would never speak for another department, I do think that there's some appetite. There's good appetite actually for making that a bit more stridently required, so that it's not as it's not perceived as optional anymore. My guess is that the first step is to make that mandatory for all new builds. But realistically speaking, most of what we're going to build has already been built. So what do we do about that portfolio? And that's more where that's where I'm kind of more interested. You can require what you want for new builds, but realistically speaking, downtown Hamilton is going to look kind of the same. It's not going to look very different in years to come. You're not going to see very much new building going on, and particularly in the slack economy. So how do we make it more attractive for building owners to participate in renewable energy, not renewable energy efficiency.
Mm. Well, I guess
And
all
that,
of
you know,
it.
that's kind of the open-ended question. You know, we could make it more attractive in respect of taxation, but, you know, building land tax doesn't really occupy that big a chunk of expenditures, I would think, to make that really enticing.
Right. Well, we have some participants in there that are in the renewable energy industry in the room. So my question would be, what what are the things that are driving commercial entities to deal with renewable energy now? Is it just cost from saving on energy? Like what are you guys in the industry finding? So I see we have John here, Stratton Woods here. I'm not sure if it's still here. Stewart's here. Are any of you able to speak on that? You see everybody's going quiet. Okay, Stewart's coming in.
Typically,
Yeah.
you know, while we're waiting for somebody to respond, typically we don't do a very good job of energy efficiency. We're much more interested as a community in renewable energy. You know, it's that tangible thing that you can put on your roof. It's something that you can point to and boast about. And I have renewable energy, and I'm doing the right thing. Energy efficiency, yeah, it's not quite as sexy, right? So, you know, how do we make it sexy?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I think those are some great points. Am I coming through okay there, Eugene?
Yeah, you're fine.
It's Stuart Quinlan from B Solar, and thanks, Jeannie, for some great input and great reminder on that duty relief potential for buildings. And I think you touched on some great points, and Eugene did also. I think the lack of a unified and enforced building rating system, a big issue. And it's an issue that could be utilized to really get more demand side management. So not only could it be used to say, well, if you're, you know, the standard Bermuda is going for by 2025 is a, you know, a C average if it's a scale from A to F or whatever. And so if you don't get there by 2025, well, your taxes are going to be increased if you're below a C. So, and then you could be rewarded the other way. But the other thing is, right, the effect of you know, keeping up with the Joneses and the image, right? So if you're in a building that has got a bad rating, the fact that you've got that image of the bad rating is probably just as much of an incentive as the tax one, right? You know, that's a big issue in Bermuda where the way we're perceived is a big deal. And they've done studies on this, right? If you put things in people's mailboxes that say, if you reduce your energy, then you know you're going to save the polar bears from being killed. Another one says if you reduce your energy, you'll save 20% on your bill. And another
That's
one
the bill
says
that's, yeah.
another one says, hey, your neighbor just did this, and so they're saving money. And the one that says your neighbor did it,
No
way
way.
more responsive. That's the biggest driver is, you know, am I keeping up with the right thing to do in society? So the lack of any transparent building code awareness, or sorry, building efficiency awareness, how many kilowatt hours per square foot is this building using compared to the next one, it makes it very difficult for renters to be able to make an informed decision before they get there. And it also creates no incentive for building owners to invest in efficiency per se, besides the price. So right now it is strictly about the numbers for a lot of buildings in terms of savings, but more and more we're seeing ESG coming into play. So environmental, social, sustainability goals. So that they'll say, look, you know, our investors and our board want to see ESG goals. So, you know, we know it's going to save money. The payback's a little longer than what we would normally accept, but things have changed. We want to make sure we're ticking the ESG box. So that's positive. But I think you're absolutely right that when we tell people all the time, efficiency is almost always going to be the best value for your money.
Yeah.
And I think if we had a rating in place, it would create that, ooh, look, you're at a D rating and next door neighbors at a B. Something's wrong. You better get your tiller in, and now you can do it duty free. Thanks to you.
Well, here's another question though, or thought, really, not a question, is the way I'm thinking about how a building rating system could work for Bermuda is it could be a very much kind of not self-evaluated, but something that's a simple form, something that could be a simple form that could be verified, something that could be filled out by the building manager themselves, rather than requiring a building audit or like an external audit. I wonder if there's something like that in place that could make it easier. And of course there's going to be a fudge factor though as well. So how do you stop the fudge factor? Whatever we do, there's a few things that have to be. It's got to be very easy to administer. It's got to be something that's enforceable, and it's got to be something that dare I say it, that doesn't really add staff. I'm not looking to build an empire here. So I'm trying to identify ways in which we can work these things out with the staff that we have, or nearly the staffing levels that we have. I could pinch somebody from another department maybe, but I don't want to have to hire engineering expertise to administer this program, if that makes sense. So, and I think the building rating world has progressed sufficiently that those sorts of measures may in fact be out there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it could be very simple to begin with. I mean, ASHRAE has a good system.
They do.
And even before that, it could be a simple spreadsheet. And as you suggest, the building owner could simply provide a Belco bill. Now you've got the kilowatt hours verified one time, and the conditioned square footage.
Yeah.
And that might already be there at planning or land valuation. So then you've got kilowatt hours per square foot, and that is all you need to start off to say, well, you've got your office space is however many kilowatt hours per square foot. Your neighbor is 20% less. You should probably find out why, and that's why you're going to be rated a little bit lower.
Yeah. And maybe it does start out that simple. I don't think that we need to do anything terribly complex, but that might be a very easy way around it.
Yeah, Barrett Lightbourne is working on that. Oh, here's Colin.
Yeah, I was going to say there's Colin. Why can't we use Energy Star? Energy Star is good, actually. I looked at Energy Star some years ago. I don't think there's any reason why we can't, but that's more complex than even what Stuart was just talking about, was just, do the simple metrics. I think, no problem, Colin.
Yeah.
But, I think one of the things to bear in mind too is the age of the building portfolio, right? So should we expect a building that was the early 1900s to be as efficient as one built now? And would there be allowances for that sort of thing? Because you could argue that it's maybe a little unfair, because their burden is going to be tremendous to bring themselves up to a modern standard. So what do we do? What do we do about that? Or what do we do about allowing maybe a grace period, or I don't know what, but I just think that there's a real disparity in what you can do with certain buildings.
I think.
Yeah,
Sorry. Go ahead. Who was that? Stratton?
no, it was me, Kimani.
Oh, Kimani. Okay, go ahead, Kimani.
I think I totally agree with both of you on the ratings, because I've worked in a company where when they were looking to move, part of the reason they were moving is because the building was really inefficient in terms of the Belco was really fluctuating from month to month. And one of the biggest challenges I had when we were looking for the next place to move to was, how do you verify if a building is energy efficient? because for most of these companies, and I'll speak for international business, their core business is nothing to do with rent. Like rent is just a very small portion of their expenses. However, when they're looking at savings, they would want a metric that enables them to say, fine, we're moving to this building because of 1, 2, 3 things, and energy should be part of it, because as Stuart has said, that everyone is moving towards ESG goals, and sustainability is like everybody wants to ensure that they're performing their business in a sustainable manner. So I think going forward, a rating system is it's a step in that direction. And also, once it's put in place, it would be really good to raise awareness, especially with the corporates and I would say the tenants, because a lot of people, the building owners may know, but unfortunately, most companies in Bermuda rent. Very few companies have their own building. So
True.
it would be just good to go out there. There are a lot of forums like Bermuda Business Development Corporation, where they normally have forums for international business, where you just sensitize different companies and tell them, okay, there's this framework or regulation in place that you guys can use when you're making decisions at a board level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Kamani. And what we've been discussing internally in Green Rock is that we will be happy to help get something like that started. I'm glad you've suggested that it's something that the energy department is interested in, because our thing was, once it started, like, where does it rest? Like, who deals with administering it, going forward? And your point about keeping it simple, yes, it should be key. And Stuart's point about it being published in a way where people can look and see, oh, wow. And even Kamana's point, that even gives even like greater relevance to it, because when you're moving into a building, how do you determine? Because these are things that are outside of your control once you've moved into a facility, So maybe we can work with BUEI and Russell and Hannah and see if we can do some energy ratings there, and find some other members in the GBF and see if they would be willing, and we can kind of do some testing of some different models. I know Colin talked about, it could be a basic rating certified for LEED's Energy Star, which is, obviously at Chubb, they're using LEED's certification there. But let's find out what matrix or model can best work for Bermuda, and get something in place that addresses that.
Because I mean, I think also one thing that I think is important, certainly in this economy, and with recent unforeseen stressors, we need to implement something that is not going to be costly for the buildings owners, right? So, because if it costs them something, I'm not sure how much traction you're going to have. If it's something that's easy to fill out, that's easy, if it's information that's easy to provide, and you don't need to spend money to provide that information, then I think you're onto a winner.
Right.
I really do. And maybe it does start as simply a thing that Stuart said, just
right, like a square foot, kilowatt hours per square foot or something.
Maybe
like
that's
that,
too basic. I don't know, but
right. But yeah, okay. So we'll put some energy around that and see. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas, but I think it's pretty well understood that there's strong rationale for the relevance of it. It can definitely add value, and but as long as we do it in a way where it keeps the administrative side of it down, then it should be feasible.
What I'm thinking is if you can find something like an automated self-service type of form, right? So, something that collates it for you, that something that comes up with the rating for you based on the inputs.
Right.
That would be ideal. And I think Energy Star does that. If I don't know if Colin can.
Right, but he doesn't have a mic today, so.
How about as an advice, Jeane, before our next little gathering, that maybe we take like Jeannie's probably got several buildings, but say I take Buoy, we all take it and we all do our square footage by kilowatts and see what we all come out with as a starting block.
Mhm.
Yeah, we could pick a few. Just, like pick a couple of buildings, and I'm thinking pick maybe some of them out of our newer portfolio rather than the older, and see what it yields.
Right.
Could,
Yeah.
I mean, mine's going to suck because I still got huge chilled water plants. So.
So maybe that's part of our homework, and everybody comes to the next meeting and puts up their paper with the rating on it.
No,
Yeah.
no,
at the begin-
it could be shocking.
Yeah, I'm
It
sure.
would get
I'm sure.
everybody thinking like, why?
Yeah.
well,
For,
well, Russell, no, that's a good suggestion, and I'll tell you why. Is that it may also highlight areas that we thought we were doing well in, and we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jeane, I want to ask you another question. We had a kind of conversation before, and you were mentioning, I know that when people are looking at going into renewable energy, there's this whole component around planning. And I hear a lot of times from the renewable energy companies about how you have this kind of like fixed planning cost that sometimes ends up like being a deterrent to some who are looking to get into renewable energy. But so you were explaining that there's some things being worked on right now in government around that. So would you mind sharing that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to steal my colleagues' thunder over at planning, but one of the things that we're working on with them is a competent persons program. What that is it's a program that exists in other jurisdictions, where if you are deemed to be a quote unquote competent person as a contractor, as a service provider, you register on a list meeting certain very strict criteria. And you won't need to go through the same elements of the planning process as someone who is not a competent person. And ultimately, it would be up to the client, it would be up to the building owner as to whether or not they wanted to go through that abbreviated process or the full-blown planning process. I cannot imagine anybody who says, yes, sure, take more time and money, I'm good with that. But you leave it there for people to exercise the option, right? So the idea of a competent person is that they will ideally not have to go through any of the typical planning process. We're working out what the details of that looks like. It may be only that a registration is required, like tell me that you're doing the work at a certain location. That's, tell me you're embarking on this project and you don't need the planning application. And the idea is that this would apply to all roof mounted solar, not necessarily ground mount, because sometimes it goes in a setback. Sometimes there's some contention around that. So maybe not ground mounts to start with, but certainly for roof mounts, because it really doesn't change anything substantial about the planning aspect of it. It doesn't change the massing. It doesn't change the use. It doesn't change any of the things that planning is generally interested in. Even if that roof is in a setback, typically speaking, solar PV on that roof won't change anything, won't make anything worse for the neighbor, et cetera. It won't create a nuisance typically. And so there's an opportunity maybe to abbreviate that planning process. And then as we look at the building permit process, because most of the time you can get a PDP, which is a pretty quick process anyway, generally speaking. So it's not planning that really chafes most of the installers I've known. It's the building permit piece of it, right? So we're looking at, if you are a competent person, then how much, and we're still working this out, but how much of the building permit process is not required for you? How much of the inspection process is not required for you if you are a competent person? And we're at the point right now where we're going to have to start reaching out to industry. So I would say expect a call at some point from our colleagues in planning, because we can't make these decisions in a vacuum. We need to know what's practical and workable as well. Because the other element to bear in mind, and I don't know how this is going to bear out, but if you're a competent person, that means the buck stops with you. This isn't a gift from government in as much as it's the conferring of a responsibility. So with that responsibility comes a certain liability. So there may be a requirement to prove that you have some professional insurance, some construction insurance, or I know there are products out there that many contractors already use. So there may be a requirement there, and I say maybe because we haven't finalized the details yet before we're ready to roll it out. But competent persons will also be rolled out in other professions as well. So for electricians, for plumbing, for plumbers, just in terms of fairly simple works for which you would have required a building permit, we're trying to streamline that as well. So we're going to start with something where we know the benefits will be palpable and observable, and it's also more manageable because there aren't as many of you. So we're going to start rolling it out with renewable energy.
Okay. All right. So basically, in short, you're looking at a process that will help to peel back on the, I guess, the whole planning process.
Yeah.
Based on the expertise and experience that exists within the companies that are on the island. And, and I was thinking when you were saying, I said, well, it's just really a few renewable energy companies on the island. So it should be easy to get everyone in the room and make sure that they're covering all the bases that they need to cover. So I don't know if any of the guys who are in the industry want to comment on that real quickly. But it sounds like good news to me. I don't know if John or Stuart.
Yeah, I can speak on it briefly. This is John Adcock at B Solar. I work with Stuart as well. We had a really good conversation with Aaron McKittrick about a year ago now. We provided him with a lot of information on the whole process, from beginning to end, how long each stage takes, and then seeing where Department of Energy would take that, and with the Department of Planning developing the competent person scheme. So it'd be nice to hear back on the progress of that soon. Whenever it gets to that stage, we'll be looking forward to hearing about it. And it's really the application process is the longest, and that's where we are hung up on a lot of some projects.
Planning application? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, the planning application process is the longest, and then processing. The processing of the certificate at the end of the project, the final certificate. It's not so much the inspections that take long. The inspections are pretty quick. That's like the shortest process. It's everything else around.
Okay.
The process.
Right.
Yeah, and
we're happy to provide more information about that if you have any other questions or anything. Yeah, I made a really thorough diagram for Aaron.
Yeah, and I was going to say that we've reached the point where we've done just about everything that we can do ourselves in a vacuum on it. So we definitely will be reaching out.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's
and I want to say, not to throw my colleagues under the bus, it's not an energy initiative, it's planning. We're supporting them and we're helping them, but we're not, this is their baby, not mine. So
right. You understood.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jeannie, I had one other point I just wanted to ask. I mean, are there any current energy efficiency requirements for new equipment or appliances coming to the island? Like, do things need to be up to a certain standard efficiency wise before they come in?
Again, a really hard one to enforce, right? So that would mean that we'd have to find some way of inspecting everything. So as an example, when you get something, when you bring something in, the bill of lading says you're bringing in, 10 GE widgets, or 10 GE refrigerators. We don't, or you might have the model number. I mean, to implement a system by which we would identify the model number and then cross-check it for efficiency, we just don't have the manpower for it, to be honest. So, my thought is, again, what can we do to incentivize the individual to make it more attractive for them to choose a more efficient appliance as opposed to an inefficient appliance. I
Right.
think a lot of it is to do with education. But it's hard to compete. So as an example, you get those container sales with cheap air conditioners. They're not efficient. They're, you know,
Right.
and how are you going to beat $300 for an air conditioner, $300 for summertime comfort? You know, how are you going to beat that? So it's not as easy logistically as you think by just banning their importation. Well, that's fine, but who's going to enforce it? Who's going to be the one to look at that? So
Well,
I'd love
yeah.
to ban the importation of anything inefficient, but it's just not, it's not a practical thing for government. So maybe something that we look at, and maybe something that we can propose for the next budget cycle is something along the lines of a rebate given for efficient appliances. You buy something efficient, you show your proof of purchase, and we can, you know, we can defray the cost of that. You know, maybe that's a worthwhile rebate to examine. I don't know.
But that's what you brought up a good point about, you know, managing it, or, you know, it's one thing to have this idea, but then, you know, how do you actually see it through? So
Yeah.
rather than being on the punitive side of it, then yeah, maybe being on the reward side of it, or just being on the kind of education and advocacy side of it. So maybe because while you were talking, I'm saying like, okay, so who brings in appliances? Who are the big people who are bringing in appliances? Now we can do a public campaign that says to people, when you're buying, be mindful of efficiency. However,
And we have
most
information
people are
like that
right,
too.
but most people are choosing from what they see in the store. So who's bringing them in the first place? And maybe it's a campaign that goes out and gets those people in the room and says, listen, again, all of this obviously needs to be tied to a larger vision, because it's like, okay, why are you talking to me about efficiency? Well, here's the big picture. Here's the goal. Oh, okay, light bulb moment. That's what we're working towards. Okay, so rather than just bringing in a container of the cheapest air conditioners that you can find, and that's the other side of it. You're bringing in somebody saves $200 on an air conditioner, but they spend $400 or $500 more running it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So is that kind of like education bridge in the public space, but also from the vendor space to say, listen, when you're doing your thing, right? Maybe your air conditioners in your container sale are not $300 anymore, but maybe you're not just advertising them based on the price. You're also advertising the savings and the running costs. You know what I mean? And just kind of helping people to understand what the big picture is. So,
and I think also, Eugene, what we're struggling with these days is the fact that you can bring anything in from anywhere as a person, right? There's services, you know, I could bring anything in through, you know, Price Busters or Gorham's or what do you call it? Or mailboxes.
Mailboxes even, or Zip-X, or no,
exactly.
Understood.
So how do you reach the individual? And, you know, I don't know. I love Stuart's idea of kind of, you know, making them envy the Smiths next door. I like that idea a lot, but you know, so how can we do that? I mean, how can we make that the part of the incentive? I don't know.
Yeah. So Denton, I see that. Did you have something to say?
Yeah. Couple of examples of that it's been used by several utilities. Usually, some of the more advanced utilities will show like by customer class and also by geography. They'll give you like a percentile ranking where you are compared to comparable in terms of your efficiency. And that's definitely been done elsewhere. And you can, you know, show someone that, you know, all things generally being adjusted for, that, you know, you're in the, you know, the lower quartile, or you're in the upper quartile, or whatever, or, you know, you're the 25th percent or whatever. But Yeah, that has been done. That's been figured out, and use most customer information systems, provided you have an advanced metering system tied into it, can easily facilitate that. It's usually a combination of knowing the energy consumption, which obviously utility does, and knowing the general or some general way of assessing the footprint of that premise. So another proxy could be ARV, because ARV kind of translates to that. So if you did it on that basis, not on a square footage basis, but an energy per ARV, you can kind of get a, you know, kind of benchmark. But that's another thing that's it's definitely being done in many places for utilities, and that way you can see, you can do it by postal code, you can do it by total customer base. And it does have the effect that Stuart mentioned, that it has a social psychological effect, that people say, well, I don't want to be, you know, the 98th least efficient person. I want to do something. And then that stimulates questions about, well, what can I do? And usually the utility will have instructions saying, you know, here are providers that are usually tied into, you know, a utility finance program, but here are providers that can help you address, and sometimes they're not, they can help you address your energy efficiency issues, you know, and they have a list of like certified providers or whatever. So yeah, this has been done.
Yeah, interesting. It's just kind of like a personal story myself, is that it's a local vendor on the island. There's a website, solarlion.bm. So anyway, they have these solar powered power units that you can charge up using solar. It's kind of like, it's a generator replacement. No noise, no fuel, no fumes. Really great. So anyway, we've been using some of these units just recently, just for some small events. But it's very interesting, like, when you can look at the front of it and you say you plug something in and it's like, oh, wow, all of a sudden the battery is going to run out in like an hour and a half. And then you unplug it and it goes up to like 6 hours. You know what I mean? So I guess what you're saying is, when you have a limited capacity, you're far more mindful about what you do. You know, so it brings back memories of when my family would say they used to have a shilling meter.
The shilling meter, yeah.
Where you put the money in, so your electricity was prepaid. And when you run out, it's just like your phone, it doesn't matter, you're in the middle of a phone conversation, is off. So the lights go out in the house. And then now, again, you're more mindful about your use. So we've shifted that, and we use more money than we can, more energy than we can afford. And then we complain about the bill. You know what I mean? So.
And Eugene, you've probably heard me say it before, but you know, energy efficiency is like going to your doctor, right? And the doctor says, you got to take off a little weight. You know, you got to lose some weight. But here's the thing is you're not allowed to use your bathroom scale. You're not allowed any information about the food that you're eating, any calorie information or nutritional information about the food you're eating. But don't worry, you can check in with me once a month. Good luck. That's kind of like, that's how energy efficiency is right now, because most people don't understand that real-time, the real-time implication of that thing that they're plugging in. So, but advanced metering, and Denton can totally correct me on this if I'm wrong, but advanced metering can provide you that information, can provide you that real-time information to allow you to make better choices. So, you know, if you
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you knew you were using a tremendous amount of energy on air conditioning a certain space, you might make a different choice. You might think, I can do with the fans then, you know, or I can do without air conditioning this space entirely, or maybe I should change the set point and see what that does to my energy use. But you don't have that opportunity to make different decisions in any sort of an educated fashion. Because, you know, you could say about the whole dieting thing, well, sensible people would know that you couldn't eat 12 avocados in a day and lose weight. You know, sensible people would know that you don't eat, you know, steak and French fries every day and lose weight. Well, you know, your sensible might be incomprehensible to somebody else, or just not fathomable for somebody else.
Right. So it's interesting. I know Stuart brought me on to this, but if everyone can kind of see, it's called a kilowatt.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just this little unit. You just kind of plug it in, and then whatever you're using, you can plug it
Yep.
into it, and it tells you how much energy it's using. So, you know, I think these are pretty inexpensive. We had them around. We had a savings for seniors program where we were doing it and swapping out LED lights and things of that nature. We were putting timers on people's water heaters and things of that nature. But we had these for that purpose, but it's very useful because if you have like an oil freezer or a fridge or some appliance in your house and you just want to know, I mean, just take your entertainment center, plug it into the power bar, into the kilowatt, and leave it for a few days and see how much energy it draws. And then you can determine like how much energy is used in a day, how much per hour. It can kind of give you a sense of it. But these are some kind of simple things that you can do now, but smart metering obviously can help you with that going forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, one of the other things that that we did with Stuart many moons ago was, and some of you might remember it, but we did an energy conservation contest, and we just didn't have the resources to kind of big it up. But I mean, the things that people, or the savings that people would affect by just doing basic behavioral changes was kind of phenomenal. And you know, you could really get quite you know, you could get quite good at being efficient. I mean, one of my employees was one of my staff was one of the guys who, if he was allowed to participate in an official sense, he would have won. He saved like 58% in 1 year, 58% off of his electric bill.
Wow.
And he did it because things like he was a real gym rat, so he turned his water heater off because he showered at the gym. What does he need the hot water at home for? Did his laundry in cold water with you know, the new enzymatic detergents. You don't need hot water. And you know, it was just a whole series of things like that, and he did really, really well. But I think the winning contestant saved 38% off their bill, and the rules of the contest were that you could not do things like deploy solar and use that as savings. It was all behavioral. I think the most we allowed was you could change out your lighting fixtures to LEDs, but apart from that, we were just like, you know, no, nothing
You
else.
know, everything else to be behavioral. So
Yeah.
maybe we can come up with something for all the buildings. So, you know, maybe Russell, we can come up with a competition and
Maybe
see what,
that's
you know.
it.
Yeah, and
Start with
and I
there.
see what you're saying about the human side. We can factor that in, but also because you're saying all this demand side management, you know what I mean? Maybe that's a way that we can help to drive it forward because people tend to like competition. So yeah, so we can have a conversation about a few of these things. I know for us, and one of the things we want to talk to the energy department about more is that we're going to change our green building awards to net zero awards. So we're going to look to set the bar very high.
Wow.
And get everyone working towards like having net zero buildings and start to actually recognize the people who are able to achieve it, you know. And when we saw the presentation we had last week from Vedco, they may have some net zero buildings in Dockyard already, which is really great, you know. So Russell said money. What's that? We can't hear you, Russell.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money.
It costs a lot of money. Yeah, I'm sure.
It does.
Sure.
So
yeah.
It costs millions to save money. You know, it's and that's the sad part. We're a charity here, and like I'm trying to get solar panels on my roof. I'm trying to get my chilled water plants changed out, and you know, we're doing everything we can to be efficient. It just some things are just out of reach.
Out of reach.
You know, you just get huge Belco bills every month, and you like shake your head like, what can I do?
Right.
You know, I sit here in my office and turn things off remotely. You'll see me here in this meeting, and my lights will just turn off from.
yeah.
You'll see me reach my hand up to wave to my sensor to turn it back on. But you know, and you put those in all your bathrooms and everywhere else, and it's a battle. But it's,
Well, and I'd have to ask another question though: is net zero realistic for some of the older buildings, Or is that something that's only going to be achievable through with the newer buildings? I don't know. So not
And
to
it's
catabolic.
right. And it's not to exclude anyone, but it's just to have like a real high so the goal is to work with everyone about doing all that we can to get to net zero. Now, another thing that we were talking about, and we're probably going to have a separate GBF on it, is around a carbon offset program. There are carbon offset programs around the world, but we're looking at the feasibility of actually like doing something locally, and maybe that carbon offset program helps charities like BUEI get solar on their roof, and shift to renewable energy. You know what I mean? So where you got companies who are looking to offset their carbon footprint by investing dollars in programs that reduce the use of fossil fuels, or reduce carbon emissions in the environment. So Russell at BUEI is a perfect example of how a program like that can directly benefit Bermuda rather than companies in Bermuda sending their money helping with programs overseas. So that's another thought. So thank you everyone for coming today. I don't know, does anyone have any other questions or comments to add?
I have one more comment. I
Okay,
stand
no problem.
corrected on my information about duty reliefs on electric vehicles. All electric vehicles are now duty free.
Okay, that's even better.
Yeah,
That's even
so
better, yeah.
somebody listened.
Yes. Give thanks. So Denton, I was just gonna let everyone know that our next Green Building Forum is on Wednesday, June 9th. And we're actually gonna have Denton Williams presenting. He's the CEO of the Regulatory Authority, and he's gonna talk about, I guess, where we're at currently with the Integrated Resource Plan and what we can expect as it relates to our energy transition in the future. So Denton, I don't know, you're here, so maybe you can just let everybody know yourself what you plan to discuss at the next GBF.
Sure. So I'll give you a bit of a preview. So we're going to talk about the Integrated Resource Plan. What is it? How it came to be? The history of it to date. Activities that we've embarked upon at this point in time, and activities that will be coming out shortly in the future. And what does IRP 2.0? What's the guidance for that looking like at this point? Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think it'll be a pretty fulsome conversation, but that's the general discussion.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone's involvement. Jeannie, thank you very much for your presentation. It's great.
Thank you for the opportunity to come.
Yeah, it stimulated a lot of conversation, which is good. And what we want to encourage everyone is to, as best as possible when we have these GBFs, just come with your questions and also like come with and share about what you're doing in your buildings, So Russell was just letting us know a bit about some of the challenges that he faces. And the idea is that in this collaborative environment, that those who have a bit more experience can help those who are just getting started with initiatives of this nature. Unfortunately, we have people like Denton from the RA and Stuart and John and Stratton that are right out of the renewable energy industry. So we have a lot of expertise around the table. So let's leverage that as much as possible, like to help us to be able to move forward with being more sustainable with our facilities in Bermuda. Yeah, so thank you guys again. Really appreciate everyone joining. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you all again on June 9th. All right.
Great. Thank you
care.
all. Take care.
All right. Peace and love.
Bye.
Thanks, Eugene.
Take care. Have
All
a good
right.
one, guys.
Thanks,
All
you
right.
too.